Hi everyone. Okay, so this is the fourth video in the series that I've been creating, making a willow heron sculpture, and this video is going to be concentrating on making the head of the heron and the S shape of the neck. I had a slight problem. I didn't have the camera in exactly the right place, so bits of the top of the heron's head are a little bit out of camera shot, so I do apologise. I'm just trying to do these quite quickly to get them out to you, so bear with me, but I think you'll be able to see what's going on. So you can see here I'm binding Willow, or weaving Willow up towards the neck, but at the same time holding that neck back in the position I want it to stay in. And at every time I spiral a piece of willow around the neck, it will hold it more firmly in that position. Notice how when I spiral rods from the body up the neck, that I don't make the spirals too short and tight. If you do this, what will happen is you'll have a sort of a lumpy, bumpy texture on the neck. If you use long, sweeping spirals, you're able to sort of maintain a smooth outline and edge to the neck. Now you can see here that the neck is not long enough, so I extend the neck now by using this next rod, and it's going to need to come up into that S shape, so I'm going to push a rod with the tapered end down through a little space I can find in the neck, and that will leave me with the thick end of the rod to use as an armature to create the rest of the neck, the S bit at the top, and the beginnings of like a beak. I inserted one rod to begin with from one side, and then another rod, so that I've got two rods thickness for that armature for the rest of the neck and the head. Now I take another rod to bind those two rods onto the neck, the top part of the neck that is already formed. Creating that long sweeping spiral, just as we did before, which will enable me then to bend that top part of the neck and the head into the right position. Now I'm really sorry because the head of the heron is almost out of camera shot here, so what I'm doing is I'm pushing rods in from the body, and I'm weaving them through and spiraling them around the neck and bringing them up to where the head shape would be, and binding and sewing them around that head area to form like a little sort of oval shape. Weaving and binding the rods from lower down from the body ensures that I'm working with a nice fine tapered end, which is what you want to be using when you're doing the sort of small detailed areas of a sculpture. You want to be using those fine tapered ends of the rods rather than the very thick parts. You can use the thick end of a couple of rods to build a little bit more structure to your heron's head, but I'd only suggest using maybe a couple because the head can grow quite quickly, and it's very easy to lose control of shape, form and definition on such small areas. So don't be tempted to try and build up the head too quickly using bigger rods. Try and be patient and use the tapered ends of the rods as they come up from the neck. Now here I'm just extending the beak because the two rods that I originally used for the armature for the head aren't quite long enough, so I'm going to bring another two rods in and weave them through, weave the tapered thin end through some little gaps that I can find in the head area or towards the back of the head. So I'm going to weave them through one at a time and use them to create that sort of very distinct, very long beak that a heron has. So now with the two thick ends of those two rods, creating an armature for the beak, I use the tapered end of one of them to weave and bind that beak shape into place. I'm creating little braces around the original armature, the original two rods, so that I don't pull that beak together, so that I get the that triangular shape. Because if you just bind around and around, all you'll do is pull the two rods together, and then you'll lose the shape. So if you can try and create a little brace in between, and not just bind around and around, but sew in between and through, it will hold the broader part of the beak in the right shape. And now I'm just cutting the tip, sharp pointed tip end of the beak with the secateurs at the right angle, so you get a very pointed end. So with the bottom rod and the top rod, I cut them at opposite angles, and then you get that nice pointed end to the beak. And then I use the leftover tapered end, which was from the rod that I used for the armature for the beak, to just continue binding around the head and through the beak, keeping in mind the shape of a heron's head by continually referring to your pictures. And I must have forgotten to put the camera on record for a part of this, because as you can see I've added, or I've left a few ends um, sticking out at the back of the heron's head, which are those little quite distinctive feathers that they have coming out from the back of their neck. They have some more on their chest, but I will show you how to do them later. Pretty sure I filmed that bit, but it's just a case of leaving a few ends and binding around them as you come back round with the tapered end to make sure that they are integral to the form of the head and the back of the neck. And again, I'm out of camera shot here a bit, so I do apologise. Back in shot again, thank goodness. Sorry about that. You can see I'm just continuing to weave up the neck from the bottom, so thick end of the rod pushed in around the chest, and then just gently weaving that thin tapered end up and through the neck and around the neck, filling in any little sort of gaps as you go, and then you're left with that lovely thin tapered end to create detail and just a finer structural form for those small detailed areas like the hedge. It's really important to just use those really thin tapered ends. Okay, so the basic shape and form of the heron has now been created. What I'm going to do next is to add detail to the surface texture and create a more solid looking form with a much finer surface texture, filling in all these gaps, weaving through and across anywhere where there are holes and gaps and cavities. But first of all, I'm going to create that defined area at the top of the heron's legs. It's slightly thicker at the top of the legs. I'm not going to bind Willow all the way around to the bottom of the metal legs. I'm going to leave the metal bare. I think it looks nice. It will eventually rust and go brown and mingle in with the Willow on the rest of the heron anyway. Notice as I weave rods or push rods in to the body and bring them down a little way down the leg, I bind them around the metal armature of the leg and then take the tapered end back up through the body of the heron. You can feel as you start to push the rods through now, it's quite dense there, so they get a real purchase, and this is good because it will make that part of the leg completely integral to the rest of the heron. Also, those ends, if you notice, I'm not weaving them in straight away. Those thin tapered ends that are sticking out at the top, I can use to either bring back down towards the leg area, or I can use them for what I was talking about earlier, for filling in those gaps and cavities in the rest of the body. Those tapered ends are perfect for that because they're fine and they give a very defined surface texture rather than the thick end of the rod. even in small detailed areas like this, I'm always making sure that I'm crossing my rods. So I'm actually weaving rather than just binding around and around or having my rods all going in the same direction. I'm making sure that I always subtly cross one rod over the next, over the previous rod rather. Now you can see all those tapered ends sticking out at the top. I'm using them to weave just under the surface of the base layer, the basic shape of the heron that we've created. I'm weaving them through, filling in gaps, filling in cavities, and kind of just seeing which way the willow is laying and which way it wants to go, and weaving it through gaps and cavities to create a smooth surface texture. Turning the heron around now and following the same process, creating the other leg. Okay, so I think I'll call it a day for this video, and I'll try and get the last one, the fifth one, to you as soon as possible. I'll get editing, but in that video I'm going to show you how to create that defined shape at the top of the heron's wings, where they're folded against its body. It's sort of like like shoulders, I guess. And also the refining of the surface texture and any adjustments to shape and form that we might need to do. So I hope it's provided you with a little bit of instruction. I am going to be creating a full online course with a lot more direction and instruction than I'm able to give you in these short, quick videos. But I hope this has given you a little bit of an insight into how I make my willow sculptures. I know there are a lot of other willow sculptors out there, and I think we've all developed our own techniques, but I'm just showing you the techniques that I've developed over the years. And I hope it's been enjoyable to watch, and I'll try and get the last video to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching.